Hello, everyone. This is going to be a very special Tales of Our Time episode. Technically, a Takes of Our Time episode because we're 3 years old now. I cannot believe it myself. Like, seriously, I cannot believe it. I almost forgot we were even turning another year older until I checked my programming notes a few days ago. So, as always, to celebrate, we'll be doing our annual Mailbag episode with a few notes about where we'll be going in the next upcoming season. So thanks for joining me, and let's get into it. Everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. And we've been doing just that for 3 years with so many guests and listeners. And I definitely checked this time. Our first episode dropped in April of 2023. So really, it's just been amazing. And as I started to say in the intro and again here, I cannot believe how quickly time has flown. So in what has become a tradition, I've compiled questions that I received over the years from friends, listeners, and RTI fans to answer them to the best of my ability. We'll be right back to our regular format episodes next week as we gear up for our June special, and we'll discuss some format things for the coming year towards the end of the episode. About those questions, this year's a little bit different, where last year we did more of an FAQ kind of theme. This past year, I have gotten many more questions that feel more genre specific or geared towards media in general, and certain themes that are or are not present in them, as well as some trends in media or even trends that have evolved over the show in the last year, and how people have chosen to engage in stories. So that's going to be kind of the theme for the questions today, is really looking at changes in themes from the last year, though we'll have a few more technical questions, a few more personal opinion questions in there as well. But I also wanted to flag at the beginning that I did get some questions from listeners, which actually will probably spur an entire episode in and of themselves. And so first of all, thank you for all of those wonderful topic suggestions. To just kind of set your expectations now, I'll be covering the effects of AI on literature and language in a full episode later this year, as well as revisiting the effects of video games and radicalization, and possibly even the conversation around publishers updating old books, meaning like books even from 10 or 20 years ago. So thank you to everyone for those suggestions. They are fantastic topics, but they're actually a little bit too much for this grab bag of an episode. But do stay tuned to hear more about them later in the upcoming season. And I honestly don't really have a transition for this, so I'm just going to get right into the questions that you all submitted. Okay, so for our first question from a listener in Taiwan, we have, what sort of qualities make someone good at radio or audio-focused media besides a stellar voice? So this is a great question, and it's true that there are certain voices that just kind of feel like they carry better over radio or audio mediums. But honestly, I think a lot more of that comes down to the way that you speak. Having an awareness of your own verbal filler words, for example, or knowing how to keep a steady tone and conversation if you'll be doing interviews will usually matter more than just the pitch of your voice or your natural voice, as well as speaking clearly and the awareness of what will and won't translate well over sound. And this usually comes in terms of like reacting to things or knowing when it's better to be direct rather than coy. But some other things that I think get overlooked really are your conversation skills in general, even when you're doing something by yourself. Something that I am even myself still working on. It's a lot more about knowing when to listen, when to follow up on something, and a good sense of self-control. For example, what I mean by that is if you're doing radio work, you're not saying something that has to be censored. You're aware of how long you've been talking and also how long your program has been recorded or is going on overall. There are other skills as well, but from there, I think it really depends on what kind of audio medium you're working with, whether or not that's audio recording for audiobooks, if that is, in fact, radio or some kind of reporting, if that's voiceovers. They're all going to be slightly different, but I'm going to kind of take my own advice, which is also good for this same question, which is to avoid being overly repetitive. If this is something anyone out there is interested in, though, I would really recommend basic microphone skills and how to become comfortable with the sound of your own voice, because anytime that you're going to do recording, you're going to hear it a lot, and it's just better that you make peace with that. Next up, from a listener in the United States, what has been a piece of media you discovered through the show that you are now obsessed with? This one was hard to choose because my reading list and watch list are both much longer than my watched list or my read list. But the first one that comes to mind is actually the movie The Bridge Curse, which I watched for Fall Freakout in 2024. There are a few reasons that this movie really stuck with me. And one is because honestly, my expectations were pretty low from the trailer, so they were easy to suppress. Second, to this day, I personally feel like this was one of the best twists I've ever seen in a movie so far. It was very well seated, the pacing was very good, and it kind of led you to the conclusion, but without giving it away ahead of time, in my own personal opinion. And it was one of the few horror movies, especially supernatural horror movies, where I really felt like everyone was doing the best that they could in the circumstances that they were in. Nobody was doing anything foolish, stupid, or like a classic mistake. Plus, it felt very Taiwanese, which is always something that during the Fall Freakout theme, Michelle and I are on the lookout for. Most importantly, though, is probably because this was actually the first in a series, which I didn't know when I started it. It's supposed to be a series of 3, I believe. And the second one I also thought was really good. The director, like I said, does a great job playing with timelines, and his pacing is revealed in a way that kept me personally really hooked. And I find myself kind of obsessively checking every few months to see if there's a date for the 3rd movie. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not sure if this is the answer that you were looking for, but I really think I wouldn't have found this movie if it weren't for this show and that theme. And it's definitely one that I absolutely recommend to others to go see, more than just about any other movie that I've found through doing this show. Then, in a similar vein to that, we had a listener who didn't say where they were from, but they asked, what is a story you wish someone would bring in as a tale of our time? This one is hard. I try to avoid making suggestions, especially for our regular format episodes. Though, if I'm honest, I've been a little disappointed to not hear more classic literature on the show, which I know probably sounds a little boring, but that's exactly why I wish I had the opportunity to talk about more of it. Personally, I never got into classic literature until after I graduated college, really, when I had more time to listen and read. And the reason I got into it is because it's usually free to record, so there's a lot of just easily available audiobooks and physical books out there. But once I did, I found it so much more relatable than I had thought. And I think reading and discussing it, I was able to see why so many of these stories have stayed popular for such a long time. So if I had my way, I would really like to see more traditionally literary classics like Frankenstein, Dracula, Camilla, Little Women, Shakespeare and Jane Austen's works, The Count of Monte Cristo, Les Miserables, Tale of Two Cities. I know they're really long. Or some modern classics like Agatha Christie's work, the Sherlock Holmes stories, The Great Gatsby. These kind of books I really love in my heart of hearts. and I love to see how they're adapted in the modern day, but I feel like maybe people are always looking for something punchier or new. So I'm not sure if my wish will be granted. Maybe I should just make a theme about it, but they are definitely, all of the books I've listed, all the authors I just listed, are for sure on my wish list, if there's any guests in the area who are listening. Which is actually a really good transition to basically the opposite question somebody also asked me. Again, they didn't say where they were from, but I did get the question, what is a genre you're just not interested in? So for me personally, I am not really into contemporary fiction. It's just not a genre that I seek out, and there are a few reasons for this. Some of the biggest are because it is so finicky, it doesn't really set you up for what kind of story you're going to be reading. In the same way that if you look for a horror novel or a thriller novel, I think you can have a better expectation of what the tone of the story will be. And contemporary fiction encompasses so many different types of stories. Also, the window for what contemporary is always shifting, and many people in many different lists have a different idea of what constitutes a contemporary story. So I'm not interested in this genre just sort of because I always feel like it doesn't give me enough information about what kind of story that I would be set up for. But if I were to compare that to perhaps a more well-known genre that is just not my thing right now, I think that I would say I'm pretty tired of dystopian settings or any kind of book or movie that presents itself as the dark version or the worst version of another more popular trope. This, for some examples, might extend into a series like The Boys, or one that bounced off of me last year was the Netflix show Chaos, even though I love mythical retellings and ideas like that. And the reason for that is that I just don't have the emotional bandwidth between writing the news and doing my other show, Doom Scroll News Report, to read, write, or play, if it's a video game, in a world or plotline that resembles the worst of what's happening in reality right now. Of course, I do think that both genres, though they're not really my thing, contemporary fiction and these darker reboots of stories, have the potential to be tales of our time and to make interesting and nuanced comments about what's going on in society, but personally, they're just not going to make it on my to-read or to-watch list at this time in my life. Another anonymous listener asked, have you noticed any trends in the media people want to talk about over the last year? And are there any mediums that you haven't seen but would like to? The biggest trend, I would say, is the increased number of audiobooks and the number of audiobook recommendations that I got in the last year. And if I were to compare it to when I first started this show, many more people were bringing me movies or hardback books that they read or they owned in their house. And over the last 2 years, I've seen the number of people who mention the audiobook recording or the audio version of a book especially increase by almost double each year. I am personally a really big fan of audiobooks. It's how I do a lot of my reading, so I try not to be too biased when I say this. However, I really feel like it's not that it's a booming industry, but I kind of feel like maybe this is reflective of the habits in people's lives changing and the way that audio makes listening and reading so much more convenient. So that's been really interesting to see. For your second question, I would say I've hardly heard any plays on this show. I think I only ever heard 1 or 2 musicals, which is a shame because I personally love musicals. And the only time that I hear plays, like consistently, is during Spicy Summer when someone brings up a Shakespeare play. So I would love to hear more about the plays and performances that people have seen and that really changed their opinions or affected them. And then this will probably be our last question because we're almost out of time, but a Taiwan-based listener asked me, has anyone ever brought a story that you disagreed with as a tale of our time? And my answer for this one would be yes, but let me explain. People have brought me stories that I personally thought don't make a great candidate for tales of our time. my show or just kind of the discussion style of the show by my own standard, by which I mean my own vibes-based reading or understanding of the work, not necessarily with the prerequisites that I've mentioned on the show before. However, I think I've had my mind changed in maybe 95% or 98% of those cases. Most of the time that I've disagreed, it's been before I hear somebody out, and in the few cases that my mind hasn't changed, it was usually because myself and my prospective guest discussed it before recording and agreed together that the piece of media wasn't a great fit for the show. Usually because they feel a stronger attachment to something else. I don't think that I've ever published something where by the end of it, I still disagreed with someone's choice for A Tale of Our Time. Are there popular books, movies, shows, and games out there that I think wouldn't be a good fit in general? Yes, but I don't keep a running blacklist, and I always allow guests to present a case to me when we've disagreed during the episode planning phase. And again, all of this is usually just a very casual conversation and sort of assessing how the story will fit within the tone of the show. So the answer is a little bit of yes, but usually I've come around and you guys have never heard an episode that I have personally disagreed with. So I hope that answers your question. That's all that we have time for today for today's mailbag episode. Thanks again to everyone who sent in a question. I hope that I was able to answer them in a way that left you feeling like you really got the answer, even if it wasn't the answer you were looking for. Of course, if you do have other questions that you'd like answered or you want your topic to be considered for its very own episode, you can always message me. My email is Stephia, STEPHEA, @rti.org.tw, or you can look up how to contact us on our website. I also love feedback, especially about some of the newer format episodes and themes that we ran through last year. In particular, the month-long deep dives on a topic or a series. So please let me know if you would like more or less of those, or even just different topics to focus on, because it really helps me plan for the coming year. They require a lot of forethought to kind of get those produced. As for what you can expect in season 4, what's so exciting to say, this year we're going to keep some of our evergreen themes as I've come to think of them, which includes our Pride Month, of course, the spicy summer focus at the end of summer, and our fall freakout where we talk about Taiwanese horror, especially in movies. This year, we're also looking to partner with some more local students and language learners to try and see how literature, movies, or other stories are impacting our younger generations, and also just reconnect with the feeling of learning from reading. You can also look forward to a Takes episode every month. That's currently in the planning process. So like I said, if you have a topic, let me know. Those episodes will be used mostly to interview authors about their upcoming or previous works, explore topics like those I mentioned at the top, or things like dragons and literature, and even another much requested trope talk or literature device talk episode. Finally, I want to close with a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has listened over the years, both to my long-term and brand new listeners. It has been so amazing to meet so many people over these 3 years, both as guests and to then get feedback from people who are out there enjoying the show, and the many ways that literature and stories more generally have continued to affect our daily lives and your daily lives as well. 3 years feels like both a very long and a really short time, and I'm just so grateful to everyone for helping to keep me and this show going. I hope that you guys are really looking forward to the next season as much as I am. So in the meantime, keep in touch, don't be a stranger, and as always, I'll see you next time.